Welcome to the Fitness Business Podcast with your host, Justin Tamzett. With over 30 years in the fitness industry, JT is a globally recognized authority with a mission to lower healthcare costs worldwide by getting more people moving and moving more often in quality facilities with qualified professionals. Every episode, JT digs deep with our guests to bring you insights that will help you lead, innovate, and boost your bottom line. So let's dive in. Take it away, JT.
Fitness business owners around the globe are scratching their head wondering, what the hell has happened to my PT department? In today's ep, I have two experts, Richard Boyd and Bob Esquerre, who have both been part of the highs and the lows of personal training successes in clubs for over 20 years each. And they have nuggets of gold on how to have personal training return to the halcyon days. If you have a PT manager, a programming manager, or a fitness director, they should definitely listen to this episode because it will give them information on how to drive this department for you. Buckle up. We are off and working out those brain cells. This is a jam-packed episode. Richard and Bob will go above and beyond with tips and strategies for you. First up, though, is our Rexer in the trenches, Brent Free from Rochester Athletic Club, who shares the number one solution to the challenge we all have, non-engagement from our part-time and casual staff. Listen and learn.
At Rex Roundtables, we're proud to have over 350 exceptional leaders and business professionals as members from all over the world. From owners to CEOs to general managers and department heads, each one will bring a wealth of experience and insight to their Rex Roundtable. For this episode, we've handpicked one of our members to share a 3-minute golden nugget, which is a proven strategy that's driving success in their business. This is real-world advice from someone in the trenches, just like you. If you're interested in learning more about Rex Roundtables and how it can benefit your business and leadership, reach out to me, Eddie at rexroundtables.com, or find my contact details at fitnessbusinesspodcast.com.
My name is Brent Free, and I'm the general manager of the Rochester Athletic Club in Rochester, Minnesota. We are a large multi-purpose health club with 260,000 square feet, an outdoor tennis complex with a water park, 6 tennis clay courts, and 8 pickleball courts. We have been operating for over 30 years, and our club has between 450 and 550 staff, depending upon the season. 50 are full-time employees. A little over a year ago, I noticed some trends that bothered me with many of our part-time staff members. Some concerns included improper uniforms, cell phone use, and less than friendly faces. Many of these employees were brand new to the workforce. I talked to some of these staff members and their managers over time, and these new trends were not correcting themselves, which frustrated me. This frustration led to a bit of revelation and a new direction for the club. We always had what I believe was a pretty thorough employee onboarding process. The journey started with vetting of the candidates before the interview process and continued through the hiring process. The employees went through a presentation by their hiring manager and then moved on through their job-specific training. This process was designed about a decade ago and seemed to work until a few years ago. Maybe it was pandemic-related. It could be due to the change in the customer service experience our younger staff are growing up with. Things like self-checkout, ordering online and pickup, instant access to entertainment experience. Many have never had a personal experience of customer service, especially to the level we strive for. Maybe new employees did not clearly understand our expectations. Maybe the training was inconsistent from department to department because we had so many different managers running these trainings. Maybe some newer managers were not as good as onboarding our new employees and clearly defining our culture and expectations. One thing that was certain, things that I and some of my colleagues thought were common sense issues were not. This was something we learned through the process that we went through. Our executive team spent 2 days off-site developing our new employee onboarding process. Created a guide called The Associate Journey for our management team. We have been using this new onboarding process for over a year, and the results are noticeable. Here is a summary of what we came up with. After hiring employees and completing their paperwork, the hiring manager gives them a club tour and orders their uniform. At that meeting, they schedule them for our mandatory welcome meeting. The welcome meetings are held at least once a week, and we have a select team of individuals to facilitate this meeting. The team of 4 people, myself included, ensures consistency. Every new employee must attend this meeting before starting their first shift. Welcome meetings last about 90 minutes. The next step is the departmental training, which their hiring manager does. This training is not job specific, but a continuation and more detailed from the welcome meeting. Once completed, their job specific training starts. Lastly, every new employee is required to attend our new associate orientation, which happens every quarter. This team consists of our owner, HR director, and myself. This meeting takes a deeper dive into who we are as a company and how we respond to member feedback and surveys. We call our employee onboarding process our Building a Culture of Excellence program. If you are dealing with similar employee challenges, I encourage you to look at yourself and your leadership team before being frustrated with the employee. Ask yourself if your employee onboarding program is comprehensive and if it provides clear expectations of what it means to represent your brand. If the answer is not a resounding yes, fix it. You will not regret the time and effort you put into this exercise. Properly trained staff that represent your brand is your most important asset. Leaving that to chance is not the right play. Lastly, I want to give a shout out to Rex Roundtables. I am a member of the Rex Roundtable GM group. Being involved in Rex has given me resources and a group of colleagues from around the country with similar challenges. Being able to bounce ideas and learn from each other is invaluable. If you are interested in Rex Roundtables, I encourage you to contact Eddie Talk, JT, or myself. All of our information is available in this week's episode notes. I want to thank you for listening. Take care.
My merch sponsor today is Fast 30 Fitness Coach. Natalie is a personal trainer in Western Australia who has an amazing studio and a recovery area for her clients. She takes them on social outings, including to the Pinnacles Fun Run Challenge. Thanks for the merch, Natalie, and if my schedule pans out, I'm in for the Pinnacles Run next year. If you'd like me to wear your merch during an interview, contact me and I will happily be your new social influencer. Just go to fitnessbusinesspodcast.com/merch. Now, a quick reminder to stay 3 minutes longer after Richard and Bob, as you're going to hear from Glenn Taylor. Glenn explains a huge opportunity for gyms is to help hotel gyms have a quality facility, simply because hotel designers don't understand gyms. I love his design ideas and this opportunity. And one last thing, if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, we'd love a star review. Obviously, 5 stars would be amazing. Thanks in advance. Now over to the main interview. Super excited for today's episode with Bob and Richard. We're going to be talking all things PT. They both have a wealth of experience across multiple continents. Today I want to cover what it would look like to relaunch or even launch PT in our clubs as we get there. But at this point, if we draw a line in the sand, what is the current state of personal training departments in fitness businesses that you guys see? What do you immediately see? What do you immediately think of when I ask that question? Let's start with you, Bob, on this one.
Okay, 4 phrases. First phrase is ouch. Second phrase, what happened? Third phrase, COVID. Fourth phase, nightmare. But despite that, this can be fixed if we think outside the box. Absolutely. Is it going to be the way it was pre-COVID? No, that's changed. Totally changed because the dynamics of the industry, of the customer, of the operators, and of the profession is totally changed as well.
Oh, I'm looking forward to diving into that. Richard, what's your answer, sir?
The biggest one for me is the trainer's no longer the authority on the gym floor. And that's the biggest thing that I've noticed is that if you look in the years past, the trainer always had a movement assessment or some sort of tool up their sleeve, which they could use to sort of dominate a conversation to become the authority on the floor. And post-COVID, to Bob's point, post-COVID, what's happened is the members come back and they're actually pretty well educated on exercise. And so now you've got trainers that haven't been as well trained coming into the system, and you've got a member that's much more educated. So you end up with this gap that used to be quite significant where the trainer was a lot more authoritative over let's say the end user, the consumer, and now it's almost balanced out. So when a trainer walks out onto the floor now, they're trying to talk to people that have headphones on, people that really know what they're doing. They're following apps. They've got a Chris Hemsworth program with them, and it's a very, very, very different world for a trainer to be in there. So what's happened is they've got to upskill now to get themselves back into being the authority again. So to me, for all the reasons behind what Bob just said, that to me, it really stands out is the trainers lost that authority, and clubs have almost seemed to, in some cases, given up on PT and are looking to AI to kind of solve this problem, which it's not.
Was COVID the reason, or is COVID just a milestone date that we look back on and say, well, things changed from about 2020 because pre-2020 there weren't TikTok fitfluencers, there weren't podcasts that everybody was listening to, but because we had COVID, we kind of turned internally and found everything online. But it wasn't COVID that caused it. It was just that date. Am I reading that right?
Okay, I would say, if I can, the challenge is when we got shut down globally, we had our most experienced fit pros, and I say experienced, they're the most entrepreneurial and the most customer-centric, had to survive. So they went out, left the four walls, hit the ground running. They didn't miss a beat. They took their best customers with them, and the rest is history. The history to the point where they are never coming back because they are entrepreneurs. Their customers, for the most part, are never coming back either. So that's what's happening there. The second group that came out were the inexperienced fit pros who were not entrepreneurs, who were not customer-centric, but they had to learn very, very fast on the run, hit and miss. They became successful. They're never coming back either. Now what we have, because of COVID, this new generation, highly educated, great test takers who have a passion for fitness, health, and wellness. They don't know how to flip that passion into a survivable business. So they're trying to figure it out, number one. And number two, you have the operators who basically just have no clue. They're trying to figure it out on the run, and they're not getting that guidance to make that pivot to be successful in terms of going back to where personal training was in the old days. When in reality, they should be looking at doing something different going forward.
Some really interesting insights there, Bob. Thanks. Richard, wearing your hat of years of experience, how should we actually measure the success of personal training in clubs? Is there a benchmark? Are there KPIs? What would you suggest there?
I think with my time at 24 Hour Fitness, what most people don't realize is that I had 3 analysts that were available to me, and I spent probably 40% of my time with the analysts. And what it allowed me to do was to really try to understand who's using PT, male versus female, age brackets, how long were they staying? And what I realized the most was the one thing that I saw was the most valuable thing to look at was if you have a great trainer, they keep your member a lot longer. And so one measure that I think you have to look at for success is what is the average length of stay of your member that's with a personal trainer? And if it's less than 3 months, I think you should be a bit nervous. And so because training drives membership revenue, the lifespan value of that member is driven by personal training. And I think a lot of times we just look at PT revenue and we just try and solve a revenue problem, but it's all interlinked. You can't take personal training away from customer service piece, which actually drives membership, because it actually does. It actually keeps the members coming back. So to me, that would be the first one. PTs affect membership dramatically. You need to focus on how is that relationship working and do you have good statistics coming out of that? And if you do, you should celebrate those trainers that are keeping people the longest. So rather than be on a phone call, I was with one of the larger companies, and I was on one of their phone calls, their weekly calls, and they used to do it once a month. It was celebrated. There was lots of education. Now it's every week, and they just hound them on sales. And no one's celebrated for being a great trainer. No one's celebrated for having a great relationship. They're just been told you haven't sold enough PT. And that means that you're not understanding how a personal trainer thinks. They don't think of themselves as a salesperson ever. So you have to focus on what are they good at? They're good at relationship building. So then give them a pat on the back for that along the way. So first one is looking at that membership lifespan in relation to PT. The big one is, are your trainers surviving 90 days? And I think if you've got 30 to 40% that aren't, then you're in big trouble, because when you have a revolving door, then you can't expand on your membership lifespan, right? Because the trainers are not having any experience with these members and they're just turning over. So you're not extending the lifespan of that member through PT, which is part of that revenue model. And then the last one is a really important one is how many people are actually showing up for the PT consultation? Because if you've got a very, very small percentage actually showing up, how can you expect a trainer to have at bat when they're not batting? So I think you've got to give them a chance to get up there and pitch, as in pitch themselves. So I think it's really important that we allow them the ability to have more people showing up through a PT consultation. And it's not a conversation about just selling PT packages of POS. Bob and I talk about this a lot. You have to alter and merge that because you've got recovery and other things now, which are other revenue models to look at as well. But you really got to look at how many people are being driven and do you have the right formula to drive enough people to turn up? And that's not just having them turn up and doing bioimpedance to tell them that they're fat and they're overweight. It's about having them turn up to a consultation where the trainer has a chance to actually show their authority.
Okay, length of membership, PT stay more than 90 days, show ratio of a PT consult. Question for you both, without notice. So you haven't been able to prepare this, but I really liked what you just said then, Richard. I'll go with you first and then you second, Bob, so you're going to get 30 seconds to think about it. Give me the top 3 things I've got to cover in a PT consultation with a prospective client.
You have to understand why they're there. Number one, over everything. If you do not understand why that person is there and the emotional driver as to why they've come to you or looking for personal training, you're dead in the water. You have to know why they're there. And that's why the empathetical soft skills of personal training is so more important than anything else. They have to know how to communicate. And, I say to them, stop talking and listen. They need to listen to that person and they need to meet them where they're at, not tell them how great they are during that first 10 minutes. So it's definitely that piece. And then in the consultation, you have to find things that are relevant to what they're experiencing. So what I mean by that is this. Most people come into a consultation, I'm going to guarantee you most of them are either restricted or in pain. So you need to understand where that restriction or where that tightness is. And you need to get on that floor and you need to resolve that before that PT consultation is over. Because if you do that, you become the authority. If you don't do that, then they don't feel any different. So they've got to know that you're listening to them. You've got to be able to resolve that tightness or that restriction. And it could be foam roll. It could be, mobility sticks. It can be anything that's driven around, let's say, mobility. And then the final one is when you're using things like InBody, eVolt, any of those devices, they're incredibly accurate when you look at fluid. And if you understand that that fluid is telling you where they're inflamed and where they're holding toxins, then as a trainer, that's very, very valuable information because you need to move those toxins before you move them. Really, really important. So that would be the 3 main things I'd say.
Bob, it's not fair. You've had more than 30 seconds to prepare for this answer, so I'm not going to ask you the same question. My question for you is, as a PT, in that PT consult, how do I prove I know my shit?
Okay, dovetailing off of what Richard just said, here's our challenge. When we have inexperienced, non-entrepreneurial, non-customer-centric fit pros talking to a customer, what is it they're selling? This is what they're selling. And it's not right, but this is what they're selling. They're selling their credentials. They're selling their training session. They're selling a training package. And they're selling a pricing option, which is wrong, 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 and wrong. What they should be talking about, again, to Richard's point, is building a relationship that talks about creating a customer-centric solution, number one, an experience specific to them, number two, an expectation and a value proposition where they know during the course of our conversation, they will get the results they need broken down in a way because they trust me. We build that rapport, number two. But number three, I tell them where they're going to be short-term, mid-term, long-term. I create a plan. And my job is to take them on that journey to success specific to their needs. And my other part of my job in the club is to integrate them into the club community. Now, this presupposes the club is ready. And that's a stretch. That's a real stretch. And that's part of our challenge right now because we can only do but so much if the clubs aren't preconditioned to accept that customer-centric focus, focusing on the concept of customer experience to keep the customer, not just to sell them, but to sell them, to keep them, to get referral. That's a whole different mindset. Most clubs don't do that. The high-end clubs do it really, really well. So that's part of our challenge. The other issue is this. The clubs are having a hard time. The clubs hire or try to hire fitness professionals, which is a mistake. They should be recruiting talent to support their brand experience if there is a brand experience. So if I am a personal trainer who teaches group exercise, who's able to do one-on-one, two-on-one, small group, large group, all fee-based, why should I come to work for your club? What is it about your club culture that's so impressive that wants me to belong and stay there and bring all my business there? When we have that disconnect, I'm not going to stay. You may recruit me or you may hire me. If you don't give me a sense of staying, I'm going to leave. This is the same problem clubs have with customers. They want an initial sale as opposed to have longevity. They do the same thing with us. Bring in a body, throw them on the floor, no career path, no way of building my income, my professionalism. Back in the day, we used to have in-house training for our fit pros. So if I have a fit pro who comes in, who's a great test taker, who's technically competent, but cannot build a relationship to Rich's point, I'm going to die in a mine. It's never going to happen. So the clubs, it's a two-tier approach. The trainers have to be trained correctly, but once we're trained correctly, is the club the right spot to take me on my journey to success? That's a part of the disconnect that I'm seeing today. Where I've seen clubs that do great, they do a fantastic job, but that's the exception as opposed to the rule.
Bob, I want to come back to you and I want to dive into perhaps some career path tips that clubs could be proposing to trainers. But first, Richard, I want to go back to you again about the emotional soft set skills that you talked about. And mate, I see this all the time in leadership, that thing that happened in 2020. We lost those skills of being able to communicate. Have you got any exercises or any suggestions that people listening today could do with their trainers to train them or enhance them on those emotional soft skills? Have you got anything that you could drop for us?
Well, I actually have a course developed. We don't need to go there.
Well, no, make sure you send us the link and we can put that in the show notes if people are interested.
Okay, we'll do. I think one thing that, and Bob's going to know this story really well because I've told it a couple of times, and Bob used to work with Annette Lang. So I consider Annette Lang to be the world's best personal trainer, always has been in my mind. And we hosted an event, JT. It was in Breckenridge in Colorado. So we had every club chain send their fitness directors from all over the world. And then we had all these presenters. We had Paul Chek and Charles Pollock and RIP. And we had all these amazing presenters, right? And then I had Annette present, and she presented towards the end of the conference. And so you had people talking about how they've trained all these Olympians and all this and done that, all this amazing stuff, right? Annette comes up and goes, I'm a trainer from Brooklyn. I ride my bike across Brooklyn Bridge, and I had this one client, and I want to give you an example. She's a 92-year-old Jewish lady, and she's lost her husband. She hasn't left her apartment forever. She just orders food in. She's very unhealthy. So Annette said the first time she showed up with her, she said, do you mind if we just go for a walk around the block? And they said, great. And then as they start to walk just around the block, because Annette just wanted to get her out of her apartment, obviously, the lady turned to her and said, would you mind if I smoked while we walk? You could have heard a pin drop, JT, in that room. Everybody was so upset that Annette said, of course you can. And her point was, and that's why she's such a great trainer, and that's what I'm getting with this question, JT, is that what she realized was, is she met that lady where she was at. She didn't try to say, you need to stop doing this, stop doing that. She just met her where she was at. And the final result was, of course, that the lady chose to stop smoking under her own accord. That's what the clubs need to teach the trainers, is it's not about them ever. It is never, ever, ever about the trainer. It is always about, they are there to be in service.
I love that. It's not about them. It's about the client. All right, Bob, now you get the microphone, sir. For many trainers, I guess, as they come on, or fit pros, they come on inside a club, they probably see a ceiling on their career. So as a PT manager or as a club owner, how do I show progression for these new trainers in a career path? What's your suggestions?
Okay, there's two realities. We have the PT manager or the fitness director, and if that fitness director manager has been there for years and has been trained, then that manager can take that person underneath their wing, create a career path for them, provided the organization is structurally set up to make that happen. That's ideal. The other challenge, which is also a reality, we have still operators and owners who promote the best personal trainer to be the manager without training him to be the manager. That is a major problem because they're great with their own business. But to grow 8 other people's businesses or 30 other people's businesses is a very specific skill set. In the past, there were programs with club industry, east and west, that was doing that. Person did that. They had every summer, their summer institute. They had their regional events, management training focused. Those things are gone now. So in default, the operator is saying, you're my best trainer, you're the manager. Not going to work. Challenge. So we have to train up the managers so they can manage career up their fit pros. But then we also have to have the business side for the fit pros being done. Honestly, this has been my rub for generations, because I'm that old, with the agencies. They've got to add entrepreneurship on the front end, relationship building, emotional intelligence on the front end, so they can hit the ground running with the right tools to be successful, be able to go into the clubs. Now, that being said, we have fit pros today who are doing a great job. They on their own are doing this, but they're not all in the clubs. So we've got to get them back into the clubs. I'm a club person, but I'm also an outside person if the club is not creating an environment for me to be there. By default, I'm going someplace else.
Great answer. And you must have read my script somewhere, because I concur with you that globally there's really no leadership training. We promote the best to now manage people that I've never had experience in. I'm excited to drop for the first time, probably on the Fitness Business Podcast, is that in 2025, Rex Roundtables will be running a leadership academy mid-year for PT managers, group fitness managers, sales managers, club managers, and even owners if they're interested. So that will be coming out. Information we'll be sharing about that. I think we're coming up to like a really nice time of the year, the 1st of January. You might be listening to this just after the 1st of January, but I think it's a nice kind of way to reset. So I want to ask you both the same question. As we enter a new calendar year, is it time to relaunch how we do personal training? Does that make sense? And then if it does, what are your top strategies for clubs to relaunch personal training in 2025? Bob, I'll start with you this time.
Okay, it's a two-tier approach. One tier is a fit pro, the second tier are the operators and the owners, because their function is going to be totally different. But if they're done right, then we can bring them both together. For the club standpoint, where the club operators win, the fit pros win, but more importantly, the customers win. So from a business standpoint, the conversation that you just asked should have started September this year as Q3 finished, but it's not. So here we are in November, which is real. Well, we have to be able to get on that. So that being said, the fit pro, we need to do what I call a SWOT, a personal business analysis of our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to review what we accomplished and did not accomplish 24, fix that as we pivot into 2025. Now, being said, first thing is, do we really run our business on top? First thing, number one. Number two, have we developed, to Rich's point, our emotional intelligence skill sets? Critical. Number three, are we strong in relationship building, being driven by empathy? Again, as Richard mentioned, critical. Have we really identified our target markets? Or are we trying to be all things to all people? Initially, yes, as we start out, but as we mature our business base, we should start to niche down, focus in, and be able to get critical mass by doing that. Number five, what are we selling? Are we selling a price, or are we selling value? We traditionally, based on experience, sell on price, which is wrong. It should be on value. It's critical. Once they understand what that value proposition is, they're going to stay and they're going to refer, and they're going to spend more money with us because they're happy and comfortable with the relationship that we've created for them. Do we do social media? Not just like post every day, Bob. No, but we created a responsive social media campaign. And by doing this, we're going to pre-qualify folks before they come to us, which means they understand what it is they're going to get into from an experience standpoint. Wow, we're talking about experience, not price. Value proposition, all that stuff comes out of that. That being said, do we feel comfortable asking our happy customers the testimonials that we can take built into our social media campaign? So I came to you, Bob, because I saw the post from Rhoda and her husband, Steve. Yes, yes, and yes. That's what we want to do. But it's got to be responsive. In our business plan, do we include a way we can grow our income, not just gross, but net? Gross and net. What is net? Profit, which means we're doing something good and we need to keep on growing it. And do we have a methodology to get there, which is going to come down to something else? How many sessions one-on-one can I do per day before I burn out? How many sessions per week before I burn out? how many per month before I burn out? So if I'm going to cap myself because I'm looking at a work-life balance situation, 31 sessions, 35 maybe, but can I pay my bills at that? If I'm charging 150 a session and I'm maybe getting 60% from the club, maybe, and that's on the high end. So I'm not having enough money to survive. So now am I going to do how many one-on-one sessions, how many two-on-one, how many small group, how many large group, and each way I go from the left to the right or from A to D, my income per training session is going to go up gross and net. Now, those 31 one-on-one sessions may be 30 sessions with a blend of different options, and now my income potential is probably 2.5 times more than what I can make with 31 one-on-one sessions a week. That is 2025. And folks are doing that. Folks are indeed doing that. Bravo to them who did the accept as opposed to the rule. So I know my time is up, so I can't get into the club side yet. I'll defer that to you.
Oh, I was going to say, Richard, have you got anything to add? I mean, he's just dropped knowledge bombs left, right, and center there. Have you got anything you want to add or from the club perspective? Because if not, I've got a question for you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Bob. No, I think, well, I want to say a couple of things here. So anyone that knows me is going to think that I'm biased towards education, but I'm going to give you an example as to one of the big issues we're having. Everything which Bob just said is absolutely spot on. Him and I agree on, and we've been for years and years and years, really believed in a lot of the same things. There's nobody that understands the value price proposition than Bob. I'm telling you right now that one of the biggest issues I had in one of the bigger companies, and the reason why I resigned, was that they didn't understand the value of personal training, and they would devalue it to bring money in the door. And every time they did that, they created a behavior where the consumer wouldn't buy until they knew it was going to be on sale again. And that made their P&L just go up and down like a yo-yo. There was never any consistency, and it drove the value down. So if you're discounting from 85 to 55 every 3 months, then PTs are trying to sell an $85 product that everyone's valuing at $55. That's a massive issue, and anything Bob talks about around that, he's been spot on for years. And small group training is something that I have seen Bob do so well with Wallbridge over the years. I've seen him do it with Equinox. No one does that better, and that is a solution. And it's a much, much bigger conversation that Bob and I talk about loads. But here's what I would say this. Here's my bias, but I want to give you an example of why it's a bias. So when PT on the Net had most club chains in the world, I would have access to all the analytics. And I could see what fitness managers were using it and what trainers were using it in every club. And I went and presented to one of the biggest club chains in the world who were very, very good at PT. And I said to them, can you prepare for me your top 20 performing clubs in PT revenue and your top 20 performing trainers? And at that point, they had a couple of thousand trainers. And I turned up to the meeting. I did not know those numbers at all. All I knew was that they're pretty good at this. So when I turned up, they had it on a PowerPoint for me. I turned around and I showed them my piece of paper, and I had 19 of the 20 clubs right, and I had 20 of the trainers right. And the reason why I knew that they were the best revenue earners, because they were the ones who were the most focused on education. So the ones that educated their staff made the most revenue every single time, 100 out of 100. Because that's what drives. So JT, you're talking about what keeps them in the clubs, what drives this career. No one did that better than EFTI Equinox. Geraldine, Dave, Bob, Annette. It was the best system because trainers were so proud to be engaged in that system, because when they became a top tier trainer, a tier X trainer, that was the badge of honor. And that everything's disappeared now in the whole industry. Education and training has evaporated. And so my thing, JT, for 2025 would be this. I'd say don't feel like you have to spend anything right away. Do an analysis. An analysis to me would be just walk the floor and see if your trainers are the authority. And if they're not the authority, that's problem number one. Problem number two is to Bob's point, is there a career tiered educational path for them? Now, that takes time. I get that. It takes time and you have to really think it through. But prior to that, the most important thing is I fundamentally believe that the certifications now are missing the stuff that they used to have. So NASM used to have the best, most relevant stuff to make a trainer the authority. And now, not just them, but I'm finding across the whole spectrum, it's just missing. So rather than us try to solve the problem of fixing all the certifications, what the club can do is build their own internal bridging course. And what I mean by that, and JT, this doesn't take long. It just takes a little bit of time. And all you have to do is bridge the information that you need them to know. And if it's about GLP-1, if it's about recovery, if it's about the assessment in the consultation, if it's about small group training, that needs to be your bridge, because if they learn that before they come into your floor, they've got a better runway for that 90 days and they're probably going to be a lot more successful. But if you just try to solve it by just this revolving door of trainers coming in and you're not solving either the problem with it at the certification level or the problem with the bridging course level or not having tiered education for them to drive and become a more valuable trainer, it's going to get worse. It's just going to get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. We have to spend back in that realm again. We have to spend back on education because it's what inspires a trainer. Talking to them about sales and numbers about PT, you will never have a trainer that will ever respond to that. You have to understand who they are. And they're not that type of individual. They're the type of individual that says, hey, Bob, you've done an amazing job. I can't believe your last 5 clients just told me how much you've changed their lives. That's how you drive a great trainer. And how does a trainer become that? They've got to have tools. They've got to have an assessment. They've got to have things that they can use. So it's a bias, but it's a bias because I've seen what it can do. I've seen what Bob did with EFTI. I've seen what the rest of the world have done when they invest on the education and how it affects revenue.
It's interesting you talk about all of that, Richard. We've been working with some of our Rex members over the last 90 days, and we're talking about the new HR world that we're heading, which is emotional relational age. So we've gone from the age of muscles to the age of brains, and now we're moving to the age of hearts. And what we've been talking there is about recognition and reward, but more importantly, affirmation, which is what you're saying, which is the affirmation of actually the downstream influence that the trainer has on people's lives. That's the really cool thing that they should be rewarded on, not the 25 sales that all left within 6 weeks.
You've got it. Because that'll happen naturally, right? Because if the trainer's happy in that environment, to Bob's point, the trainer will just generate revenue. We're trying to put the cart before the horse. We've got to get them passionate and hungry. And as they drive that, they drive this amazing experience because they believe in helping that individual. They truly believe in it. I think that's what's missing to me. Like, I haven't seen that now since COVID. And I understand why the clubs have had to remove lots of things and lots of things have changed. I'm not putting blame anywhere at all. I'm just saying, and that's the reason why the certifications haven't had to change their content, because no one's really pushing them to do that, right? So I think it's, to Bob's point, it has to shift, right? Because things have changed.
Oh, bugger it, Richard. Bugger it. Just blame them. Just blame those club owners. Bob, I've got one last question for you in it, and I know you could probably do a whole podcast on this, but Richard just mentioned about, the qualifications and then they become status. I think he said status X. Now, I'm not saying personal trainers have big egos. I don't want to be quoted as saying personal trainers have big egos. But when you're at Equinox and you had your trainers going up through status levels, does that still drive trainers these days?
Okay, here was the challenge. People came in as Fit Pros entry level because there was a sense of pride and a sense of belonging. And we created a career path where their compensation goes up. But part of the training, to Rich's point, was to deflate the ego, because it wasn't about the trainer. It was about the experience we created for the customer/customers. That was key. But what Equinox did really, really well was a marketing campaign for every trainer. So if I had on 76th Street, 35 trainers had different sub-brands within Equinox, and every customer didn't want to train with every trainer. The customers picked and chose those folks that they were simpatico with, which is fine, which is great. So yes, there was an ego per se, but it was for the benefit of the brand. The brand resonated for the customer and the staff, not just the trainers. The staff included the maintenance folks, included people at the coat check, the juice bar, the clothing shop. Everybody came together for the value of the brand. That's the key. It's about the brand. The jobs are different, but everyone respected everyone else. The Ericos really, really believed in the concept of La Familia, and it was embedded in the culture from the ground up from day one. Absolutely critical.
And TT, can I just add one piece to that? A lot of trainers come from training environments where they've had coaches. And if you're an athlete and your basketball coach comes up and says, man, JT, you just killed it, man. You just saved the day. That was amazing. That's all that they need. And sometimes you've got to understand that's the type of individual you're dealing with. And the more pats on the back that they get, that's recognized for how they've helped somebody else, not how they're this amazing athlete, but how they've helped the team, how they've helped the member. That is what drives them. And that is emotional intelligence side. And that's why the soft skills are so ridiculously important.
You know what? You just reminded me of something we did. The Ericos insisted on day one, when a personal trainer worked out on our own on the floor, we had to wear our name tag. And if there was a member who needed help, we would stop our workout to help that person. We wouldn't do a sales pitch. We just help them. By helping them, the first response was, you gave up your own workout time to help me. Yeah, no problem. Shook hands and walked away. That's all.
Richard, 37% of current employees want recognition in the workplace, and 43% of them want it done privately. So to reaffirm what you just said, a text message or a quiet conversation is more important than putting it up in lights so that everybody can see it. Great tip. Gents, we're almost done. We like to finish every single episode with a 90-day challenge for people where they take the knowledge. You guys have dropped some enormous knowledge bombs in the last 40 minutes or so, where they take that knowledge and they turn it into actions. Richard, what's the 90-day challenge you're giving the Fitness Business Podcast community today?
I think firstly, don't spend any money yet, just assess first. So I think don't try and solve it by just throwing money. Please understand that recovery is not compression boots and guns thrown into a corner. So please understand that that's not recovery. So because there is a big revenue model there just waiting and it's not being done correctly. And the only ones that are doing it correctly are some small individual franchises that have done it really well because they understand what recovery actually is. So don't spend any money, assess. And what I'd like them to assess is this: is the trainer the authority on the floor? I've mentioned that. Try to just have a view of it, because if they're not, your PT business is never going to work. They have to be the authority. And if that means that to be more educated, then you have to educate them to be the authority. You can't get around it. Are you choosing the right certification? Find the ones that are teaching soft skills, the emotional side that we talked about, and something that gives them the tools. And if they haven't got the tools, then just think through, what do you think that they might need? And how would you create a very, very simple bridging course, which they can do internally, online, very simple to do. On the consultation process, I would have them all just view their current consultation process and ask themselves this: is the trainer taking the person onto the gym floor during the consultation? If they're not, I think that's a massively missed opportunity. And ABC Fitness, please get back to me, because this next one is really relevant and I need to work with you to make this happen. Where we're losing revenue is when someone says no to PT. We never talk to them again. Whereas if someone said no to PT, or they couldn't afford it, or it wasn't relevant, or they felt like they had the same amount of information as the trainer, why can't we follow up in 2 weeks' time, in 4 weeks' time, and ask them if maybe they just want to do a recovery session with that trainer once a week? Because you can't get performance without recovery. You have to recover somewhere during your week. And if we can't follow up with those people, then I just think that revenue is just completely lost. So they can just review that process and say, does the consultation go onto the floor? And when the person says no, why is that the end of the conversation? Why can't the trainer connect with them over the next couple of weeks, to Bob's point, and just say, hi, how's things going? You said you want to lose weight. How's the weight loss going? Why can't we just remind the trainer week 2, week 4? Okay, I think there's a lot of missed revenue there. That's all just observing. It's all observing. And then I just think, just when you look at POS, I think people need to play around with POS. POS shouldn't always be the same thing. I think you need to play around with 1 versus 3-pack versus 5-pack versus, because Bob made a great point to me a little while back and I hadn't thought of it. He said, you don't want trainers buying or being sold massive packages, because they get paid up front and then they've got to try to fulfill this over the next 2 to 3 months. You're better off doing a monthly cycle where they can get their income to be more level. And I think, Bob, that was such a clever argument. And I think the POS conversation, JT, people need to fiddle with that. Just fiddle with it. Just take 2 clubs and do a 3-pack. Take 2 clubs and do a 5-pack. I think they need to test that around. And recovery is something that people need to understand, because there's a lot of lost revenue just sitting there. But it's not compression boots and guns. It's a much, much bigger conversation than that.
Totally agree. Great tips. All right, anybody listening is now exhausted after Richard's 90-day challenge. So, Bob, can you give us something simpler in 90 days?
Okay, I'm going to look at the operator, and the operator, they're running a business. I'll give them that, but are they running it correctly? So they've already reviewed their actuals from 2024. Fingers crossed. The question is, how did they review their actuals? Did they really get granular and honestly self-reflect as to how good they performed in 2024, why they did that, how bad they did in 2024, and what did they miss? So that's going to be the conversation in terms of what they should be looking at for a 90-day window. So, number 1, gross income. They all talk gross. My sweet spot is net. I want to know how much your profit is growing. They're not growing. Your model's broken, guys, gals, whatever it is, you're operation is not effective at all. So you got to look at gross and you got to look at net. And if you're not looking at net correctly, you should bring somebody else in who's objective to say your net is great or your net income is suspect. And why is it suspect? Number one. Number two, if all you focus on as a fee-based, non-membership due revenue source is one-on-one, I can tell you right now, your net income is flat. You can't make money with a locked-in rate. You've got to offer other services like one-on-one, two-on-one, small group, large group, where you can manipulate your gross and net income opportunities. That's key. But think of this now. If someone is with a trainer for 5 years and say, Fred, I love you, you're like family to me, but I just really cannot afford one-on-one, what does Fred say? No problem. We can do two-on-one and we can reduce your per session fee, but the income gross goes up for myself and the club, and then the income goes up for myself and the club. So it's a win-win. But Bob, I really can't afford two-on-one. Hey, small group. We will find a magic sweet spot to make it work, as opposed to losing that customer. The role is never lose a customer who's happy. What are the alternatives? And I don't believe in discounts. Forget that. No. Discount, no. Different service options, different programming options, yes, with different price points. So flexible programming and flexible pricing is going to jumpstart growth in your gross and net for 2025. Critical to make that happen. But if your trainers don't stay, what's the impact on your customers? Is the customer going to stay if the trainer leaves? So there's a retention issue. So you really have to make everybody whole, win-win, win the customer, win the fit row, win for the club. Totally critically needed and important. But you need an objective somebody to walk in there and say, yes, this was great. No, this is bad. And why it's no, with an alternative to fix that going into 2025.
Multiple times today, gentlemen, there have been drop the mic moments. You guys have been fantastic. I so appreciate your time and your energy, but I also appreciate your passion for the industry and the passion to try and help PTs make a buck and clubs keep PTs. Fascinating discussion. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. We'll put all your contact details in our show notes. Richard, you're going to send me the info on your course that you're doing on emotional soft skills. So we'll put that in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Welcome to our 3-minute sponsors pitch on the Fitness Business Podcast. We spotlight a Rex Roundtable trusted supplier who provides innovative solutions to help you enhance your facility, boost member engagement, and increase profitability. Stay tuned to discover their suggested actions to elevate your fitness business to the next level.
Good morning. I'm Glenn Taylor, Managing Director of Fit in Shape. We're a small but dedicated team of fitness professionals who've been in the industry for in excess of over 23 years. Thought I would do a brief discussion around hotel gyms, rather apt that I'm sitting in one now. One of the common misconceptions of a hotel facility is that the fitness experience isn't that important. Every aspect of a hotel facility needs to match up to your client's expectation, and the fitness facility is no exception, especially those who do go out to train. On average, in most Western countries, 15+% of the population like to train, but more and more we're seeing even the average novice wanting to go into a fitness facility while they're, on holidays or having a break to feel like they're doing something right. So some of the things that are quite important when you're looking at the design, the layout, and obviously your equipment selection and the facility, lighting is vitally important. Mirrors to create the space to make it feel bigger. Getting equipment that provides the most amount of bang for your buck is quite important, because obviously space is a big consideration in any fitness facility, but certainly in a hotel facility. Multi-use doesn't always mean better or exceptional. So it's not just looking for multi-use, but if doing equipment in a facility, make sure that it has a small footprint and that you can do the most amount of usage in that small footprint is key. But again, things like flooring, types of flooring, electrical boxes and power supply, hidden cupboards can be a big thing. Make sure that things are kept away so you minimize the clutter in a space. Most importantly, you want it to feel welcoming, warm, and an environment that people want to train in that, again, matches up to what the standard is to the rest of the facility. If you'd like to know more, please reach out. Feel free to get in contact with myself or the team. Again, we're Fit in Shape. We work with a number of different equipment suppliers to ensure that your facility can be equipped with the most floor space efficient and floor space saving equipment, but also that we come up with a design that suits and goes in with sync to ensure that your facility gets the best layout and overall usage in the facility. Thank you.
This episode's Rex Roundtable's trusted suppliers for you to support are HR Network. All your HR needs solved at the end of the phone. MyZone, monitoring, tracking and enhancing fitness through heart rates. MXM Metrics, analysing and improving gyms through member metrics. Atlanta Strength, made by and for those who are dedicated to shaping greatness. I must confess that I was so nervous when recording next week's episode. My guests are Alison Flatley and Mel Tempest, two global powerhouse leaders who are both passionate about paving the way for female leadership in our industry. I guarantee you a dose of inspiration for any female listeners and insights for our males on what females want in their career journey. Subscribe to the show notes on your preferred podcast platform or go to fitnessbusinesspodcast.com/subscribe so you don't miss the show. Seriously, never miss a show and allow us to drop into your inbox all the critical links. Just go to fitnessbusinesspodcast.com/subscribe. What we leave behind is not set in stone monuments, but what is woven into the lives of others. I'll catch you in 2 weeks.